think John Thune's been pretty strategic, pretty clever so far, sort of staying under the radar, but insisting on confirmation hearings. So now the coverage of the Hill is all about when the confirmation hearings happen rather than if they will happen. So recess appointments, controversial. They're not the best way to run the rodeo when you want to reform the entire federal government. You need some stability. So I think Thune's making the case that if you really want to get your aims done, you need the confirmation process to have the Senate stamp of approval. And so far, that's sitting well with Donald Trump. The Hegseth nomination is the one to watch, I think, because people like Joni Ernst, who's up for re-election in Iowa in 2 years, she's been big on sexual assault. Whether, in fact, she starts to derail or defect on that nomination is the next thing I'm looking for. Rand Paul came out quite blatantly and said, don't want to use the military for domestic law enforcement on removal of people who are undocumented. That is a big shot across the bow. And as Tom just said, Rand Paul is sort of the product of the Tea Party movement. So in that case, the overreach of the federal government on immigration may push the party into conflict on things that are domestic policy.
So I guess the question here is, what happens, what should we be paying attention to between now and Inauguration Day for this incoming administration?
Certainly this particular, if Rand Paul goes there, Mike Lee might go there. If Mike Lee goes there, maybe Ted Cruz, maybe not goes there. The question is, Trump wants to use and really expand executive power, and he wants to have the military involved somewhere. Right. And that's posse comitatus, as Tom was talking about last time. That's a federal law, right? That's more than 100 years old, 150 years old almost. So now we're looking at sort of the first conflict. And I think that's, Paul, what I'm looking at here is, do the hearings get a little dragged down by Trump's proclamation that he wants to use the military? That's what I'm looking at, and that affects Hegseth, it affects Gabbard, and even Homeland Security, Kristi Noem. Right. So I think these are the things I'm looking at in the next couple of weeks.
Professor Schiller, in terms of your study of history back pre-Revolutionary War, the marginal issue here, I'm serious, the marginal issue is, will government act marginally and slowly, as the Treasury Secretary designate has suggested, or are we going to see the magnitude that Trump and MAGA want? What's your likelihood that we see bold magnitude versus a more marginal approach a la the Treasury Secretary?
The statements will be bold magnitude, and the product will be very gradual, because the bureaucracy, as you know, pretty much invented by Thomas Jefferson. That's where we got the name, bureau, lots of drawers, bureaucracy. I think that's what you're going to see. You're going to see lots of statements, but moving this behemoth that is the federal government is a very slow and difficult process. Even Ronald Reagan couldn't be as successful as he wanted. He couldn't get rid of the Department of Education, for example. So I think you'll see lots of broad statements. I think the impact will be slow, but the problem with the Republicans, if it's too slow, you bump right up against 2026. Right. So the Republicans need to get whatever pain is going to happen has to happen this year, not next year.